Many climate change emails uncovered at the University of East Anglia shed serious doubts on the science of global warming. Now, in just one example, the university's Phil Jones instructs his colleagues to respond to a Freedom of Information Act request by deleting emails. Quote, Mike, can you delete any emails you may have with Keith regarding AR4? Now, AR4, by the way, is shorthand for one of the IPCC's climate change reports. Now, he continues. Keith will do likewise. Can you also email Gene and get him to do the same? We'll be getting Casper to do likewise. And if they weren't dumping data, well, they were certainly fudging it. Another email between these colleagues from 9 years prior shows the dishonesty was long in the works. It reads, quote, I have just completed Mike's nature trick of adding in the real temps for each series for the last 20 years, i.e. from 1981 onwards, to hide the decline. Well, that would be the decline in global temperatures. So could it be any more clear that these so-called climate scientists are hoodwinking the entire world community? Joining me now with more is the author of Red Hot Lies, How Global Warming Alarmists Use Threats, Fraud, and Deception to Keep You Misinformed. Chris Horner is a senior fellow at the Competitive Institute. Welcome back, Mr. Horner.
Thank you, Sean.
Well, it looks like I think these so-called scientists have done all of us a great service, because all of this information was used by the United Nations. All this information was going to be used even by politicians in the states to implement cap and tax. I think this is a good thing in the end. What do you think?
Well, everything that has come out was subject to the UK's Freedom of Information Act. So it was going to come out eventually. We've seen about a dozen years of hijinks going on, things that I detailed in Red Hot Lies, naming these names, by the way. These are not revelations. They are affirmations of what a lot of us have been telling policymakers. There's very dense smoke coming out of this fire of apparently falsified results and so on. I don't think they advertently did us a favor. They certainly inadvertently did. They were rather candid amongst themselves. This is not about the titillating expressions of joy that a skeptic died and so on. This is about it's the fraud stupid. It's about the admissions of falsifying results, collaborating to subvert and violate the laws,
right.
And it appears with an intent to defraud. So whomever released this, and there's no evidence it's a hacking, it may be, but this is all subject to their FOIA law, Freedom of Information Act. Whoever released this whistleblower, I bet, is the one who did us a favor. I suppose these alarmists did in their candor.
Yeah. All right, and I want to get to that question about, quote, the so-called hacked email story, because the Democrats want to focus on that, not on the content. But it seems to be having an impact. Scott Rasmussen poll out today. Now 59% of Americans believe global warming data is rigged. So certainly it is having some impact, even though I think the mainstream media has ignored it. Do you think that puts an end to cap and tax?
Oh, well, not without a struggle. There are hundreds of billions of dollars at stake here. Already we're spending $7 billion a year on climate-related research writ large. There's an awful lot at stake if they win in a wealth transfer. They won't go gently into the night. There will be death throes. There will be a vote on the floor in the Senate. The president's about to go to Copenhagen and commit to Kyoto 2 on what he calls a political level, which is the same mistake Clinton made, knowing there was no political will here to support it. So the president will be dragging our name through the mud again, just as he's accused others of. But ultimately, no. This is the biggest tax increase in American history. It's now on the premised on falsified results. They won't get this through. It looks like 59% of the American people are paying attention to your channel because the establishment press has ignored this because they're so heavily vested in it.
No, I think that's a great point. But look, in the long run here, though, the more people learn about this, I think the more people are going to be skeptical, as, in fact, they should be. There's one other email that actually said, the fact is we can't account for the lack of warming at the moment, and it's a travesty we can't. Here's the question that I think most people want answered. Why would scientists so blatantly risk their reputation? Why would they put aside all of their training to advance a political agenda? I have my interest in yours.
There's not a unifying theory. You can follow the money. Again, we spend an enormous sum on this. But there are an awful lot of collectivists in the scientific world, in the academic world. As you know, there are a lot of academics involved in this. The president's chief science advisor, John Holdren, is a population zealot and, if not borderline communist. You don't check your political beliefs or ideology, even if they're extreme, when you accept your PhD. So there are numerous motivations. Scientists are people, too. But again, there's tremendous money. Al Gore set the terms of the debate. Where you get your money dictates your opinions and your motivations. So we know that they have been willing to fudge things, either for the money, either for the ideology. They're not mutually exclusive, maybe both.
All right, but now, again, this is a very important part, because I am certainly a privacy person. I don't want my emails hacked. I don't want any of my friends' emails hacked. But the issue here is different, because there was a Freedom of Information request, and apparently they were not going to be forthcoming. Apparently there was this well-orchestrated scheme we can see in these emails to hide the truth. So it seems like this is a very different story. This is more about a whistleblower. And we see Barbara Boxer saying, you call it Climategate, I call it email theft gate. I don't think that's an accurate story as it's been portrayed in the press. Do you?
Well, I'm sure she was equally broken up about Robert Bork's trash being stolen, or mine being stolen by Greenpeace, for that matter. The fact is, there is no evidence in the record that this was a hacking. All of this information was subject to the UK's Freedom of Information Act. All of it was being unlawfully withheld. She can distract with crocodile over this being an unlawful seizure of data that the public owns and was entitled to, but that's to distract from the substance. If she wants to prosecute, that's great. You know, I saw a reporter today who there's no evidence that can convince him that there's fraud or fudging the numbers going on, and yet he runs with a headline today insisting that this was a criminal hacking. There's no evidence in the record. If you want to believe it's a hacking, you have to take the word of people who've been exposed in these emails as frauds and charlatans. So I'd go with whistleblower for now.
All right, let me go. One last question I want to ask you, because the science advisor of Barack Obama, John Holdren, seems to be involved in this as well, in as much as, you know, back in 2003, he was trying to demonize, quote, Harvard professors and, quote, for your entertainment to create a bias. And you also, you have a Freedom of Information request out yourself with NASA. You believe they may be fudging the numbers. I want you to react to those two things.
Right. Briefly, Mr. Holdren was sending around an email indicating that he was a part of a very large effort to rewrite history, to airbrush out the medieval warm period called climate optimum. Fewer crops failed, fewer babies died, and so on. That was part of the historical record. They got rid of it in the third assessment report that this hockey stick related to, and that is also related to these Freedom of Information Act requests I have now. 2 years outstanding with NASA. They seem to have been doing similar things, and I have a feeling we're going to establish that.
Biggest scientific fraud, I think, in our lifetime. Chris, great work. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean.